Now though to France, which has ordered another 55,000 people to evacuate the area around Bordeaux as devastating forest fires continue to burn. About 250,000 people have now been told to leave their homes. The French President Emmanuel Macron has promised to rebuild after an area 10 times the size of Paris was destroyed by the fires. A giant military cargo plane has been deployed for the first time to drop fire retardant near Bordeaux. In central Spain, tens of thousands of people are also facing disruption, with 2 large fires close to converging just a few miles from Madrid. The government has declared a national emergency, and there are hopes that a change in weather conditions could help efforts to tackle the blazes. Our Paris correspondent James Waterhouse reports.
Despite a military mobilisation in France, these fires are far from being under control, if you ask officials. Wind is blowing smoke towards Bordeaux, 40 kilometres away, where thousands of people have been evacuated to. Thanks to higher humidity and lower temperatures, the fires this weekend have been less intense, but the weather forecast is expected to turn unfavourable once more.
For us, the key points to watch out for, which we share with the fire department and all law enforcement agencies, are that the threat remains very serious.
In the Gironde region, civilians have also joined the effort to try and contain the flames. Police went door to door in Saint-Médard-en-Jalles to make sure an evacuation order was being followed. 91-year-old Claude was reluctant. I'm thinking about it, he says, but it's just not me. In Bordeaux itself, some of the almost 200,000 evacuees try to gather their belongings and emotions.
I didn't understand, but I'm in tears because I don't get it. We felt belittled, less than nothing. Do this, do that, you don't have time to think, you don't have time for that. I left my lamp on, I wanted to turn it off, but they said leave it. I wanted to take toiletries, but they said leave it, there's some over there. What did I put in my bag? Silly things. Well, I took my medicine, that's it. And then I had to leave. 3 o'clock in the morning, I was already in their car.
This is what they were forced to escape, and what Mathieu Plessis is returning to. It's hell. We've lost everything, he says, as he surveys what's left of his home. Wildfires have also devoured areas west of Madrid, where 25,000 hectares have reportedly been burned, twice the surface area of Paris. While efforts here have also been helped by a dip in temperatures, the country's Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has warned of a difficult few hours ahead because of not knowing how winds will develop. Under a European Union agreement, Portuguese fire crews also joined their neighbours' fight. The priority here is to save lives, they say. Wildfires are a naturally occurring phenomenon, but the scale of these is anything but. An exceptionally wet winter led to high levels of plant growth, which was then dried out by the hottest start of the year on record. Human-induced climate change has played a central role here. James Waterhouse, BBC News, Paris.
Our Paris correspondent Hugh Schofield has the latest.
There was a statement in the middle of the night from the préfet of Gironde department, that's the chief government officer there, saying that things had taken a turn for the worse overnight. That, as you heard there from James' report, there were slightly improved conditions yesterday because the wind let up and there was a certain degree of moisture in the air. That seems to have ended, and you've seen the fire advance towards the south, it seems to me, because there have been a number of new towns ordered to evacuate. They're along the kind of eastern edge of the Bay of Arcachon, between that inlet, that sort of inland water, and Bordeaux. Not therefore getting near to Bordeaux, but more moving to the south. And the A63, which is a motorway leading from Arcachon Bay across to the east to Bordeaux, has also been partially shut, I'm reading this morning, which suggests that things have not got easier and the conditions have worsened overnight. They're talking a lot today about this phenomenon called pyrocumulonimbus, which is a kind of fire cloud that you get in these very, very hot fires, forest fires, which are incredibly dangerous because they essentially mean a kind of a funnel or a tunnel of hot air shooting up into the air, sucking up all sorts of vegetation and spewing them out a long way away. And of course, this is the worst possible thing when you're trying to fight a fire, because it means that burning debris is being deposited, maybe a good kilometre or two away from where the main fire is, and new fires are starting that way. So the outlook is not yet promising, I would have to say.
The French authorities, we're being told, have now evacuated 220,000 people, a huge number. What support, help is being offered for them?
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about this being the biggest peacetime evacuation operation in France. Maybe it is. It's certainly as big as I can remember. Getting on for 250,000 people now. Most of them have gone on to relatives and friends in their cars. They've just moved to other places. Some, particularly the elderly and the sick. I mean, what a lot of you heard there. Old people have been evacuated, and also old people's homes, social care homes have had to be evacuated. There are quite a lot of them in these rural areas, and a lot of them will have been brought either to other homes or to this big gymnasium, or actually it's an exhibition centre in Bordeaux, which has been converted into a makeshift centre for receiving these evacuees. And there 5,000 or 6,000 people were put up overnight. I think a lot of people pass through there. They're brought there. They kind of gather themselves, maybe get a meal, a rest, and then on the telephone work out with relatives or friends what they're going to do and move on. So only a fraction of the 200,000 or more who've been evacuated are actually staying there, but it's a very important stopover for people. And of course, everyone wants to know when they can go back, but for the time being, there's absolutely no sign of that.
That was Hugh Schofield reporting there. Mark Howden is the Emeritus Professor at the Australian National University and Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He gave me his assessment on the wildfires in Europe at the moment.
Firstly, we've got global warming driven by greenhouse gases, and Europe is the fastest warming continent, so that's particularly notable there. In addition to this, in Europe, what you've seen is the high pressure systems that used to be over the Mediterranean have moved further north, so then now they're situated over northwest Europe. That means those mild and moist westerlies from the Atlantic don't come in and make the landscape more moist. And we've seen increased blocking highs, so that's highs that become stationary and form heat domes. And so all of that means you dry out your soil, dry out your fuel, the vegetation, and also dry out the air. And those combination actually is prime conditions for more frequent, bigger and more severe fires.
So are these weather patterns here to stay, or is it now beyond the point that we can reverse them?
Well, they're here to stay while we emit large amounts of greenhouse gases. Various studies show that if we continue to emit at current rates, we're probably going to double or more extreme fire risk in Europe.
We've been hearing about a climate emergency for many years, haven't we? And that's a phrase that Pedro Sanchez reiterated yesterday when talking about these wildfires. Do you feel that the world is paying enough attention to the situation that we find ourselves in?
Probably not. When we look at the human, environmental and economic cost of climate change already, it's actually much greater than the cost of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and minimising those future changes. So we're really not acting in a very rational sense at the moment. And all the time that accumulated costs, including those which you just showed on your report, are building and building. And unfortunately, in many cases, they're not being linked to climate change. So people aren't including these damages in their considerations for things like budgets and planning and governmental strategies.
Why do you think that is? You sit on you're chair of an intergovernmental panel on climate change. Why aren't world leaders prepared to deal with the climate emergency? Is it just too costly? Is it down to politics?
I'm actually a vice chair, not the chair. That's Sir Jim Ski from the UK, who's the chair. But look, it's a very complex thing. It's partly about politics. It's partly about incumbency and the power of the fossil fuel lobbies across our nations. And that's very large. The IMF estimates that the direct and indirect subsidies to fossil fuel usage are about $7 trillion a year. That's the degree at which governments support those essentially polluting industries which are generating those very, very large costs that I mentioned. And those industries have known about this for a long time. So, for example, Exxon had, going back to the 1980s, they had very good projections of what climate change would occur under any given emission scenario. So this has been done in pretty much full knowledge of the damages that it would do across the world.
Professor Mark Howden there.